intention of this piece is to examine the long-running notion that NNAMDI KANU had jumped bail back in 2017 and thus deserved the extraordinary rendition that recently saw him to Nigeria. Whether you like KANU or not, everyone would agree that the only logical way of determining whether he jumped bail or not is to pedal back to the state of affairs before the military invasion of his homestead in September 2017. Here we go. As of September 2017, KANU was free on bail on a subsisting court order. His bail was not on personal recognizance but on a bond posted by 3 sureties. KANU was neither judicially nor administratively ordered to be rearrested for breaching his bail or on account of any new charges filed, and his next hearing date was set for the next month, October 2017. It is beyond argument that the invasion achieved a complete military routing of KANU's home and caused fatalities of 28 people and injuries to many, including to KANU and his parents, who were present and trapped at the premises during the invasion. The invading forces also captured an undermined number of occupants of the premises, some of whom are now presumed dead as they have not been accounted for to date. Most significantly, KANU himself was also unaccounted for until he emerged in Israel several months later. The inevitable question that arises from the foregoing fact is this: what are the natural or foreseeable consequences of such a lethal military action against a defendant who was free on bail? As common law, a bail is simply a binding promise by an obligor surety to produce a defendant in court whenever required to do so. The money paid by the surety to back up his promise becomes the bond that he stands to lose should he fail to produce the accused when required to do so by the state. In other words, a bail is written contract in which the state is the promise and the surety is the promisor. The defendant is merely the subject matter of the contract, and the fundamental purpose or consideration is to have the accused appear in courts by compulsion of the bond posted by the surety. So just like any other contract, a contract of bail is subject to universal rules of contract, including, in this particular case of NNAMDI KANU, an implied covenant of the part of the Nigeria state that it will not in any way interfere with or impair the ability of the surety to produce KANU, whenever required to do so. This includes the covenant of the state will not take any step with the defendant that might increase the risk of his flight from the jurisdiction or constrain the ability of the surety to produce the defendant at his trial. So when the Nigeria state, which was prosecuting KANU and thus and abiding legal interest in his appeal for his trial, ordered our army to invade KANU's home, it breached the basic covenant that required the Nigerian state or the federal government not to create a situation that will make it impossible for the surety to produce KANU in courts. And given that KANU's death, mortal wounding, capture, or flight are the foreseeable consequences of said military invasion that can impact this in its availability to appear in court, the contractual doctrines of frustration and force majeure will come into play. It can only happen that in certain scenarios, such as this case of KANU, a unique force majeure event will raise the prospect of another contract killer known as the doctrine of frustration. Under this time-honored doctrine, a contract, including a bail contract, will be deemed frustrated if its fundamental purpose, assuring appearance of NNAMDI KANU in court, is destroyed to the point that this appearance in court becomes impossible. In such events, the promisor or surety in the bail contract will be discharged from his obligation to produce the accused. Now, you may ask, what is the position of the promisor, the Nigerian state, in this whole saga? A Nigerian state that had KANU on trial in the course of time released him on bail, posted by another. Then the same Nigeria state ordered its army to leatherly invade KANU's home. During the invasion, KANU was confirmed to be on location, trapped and in line on fire. KANU is human, so his human instinct to survive will instantly take over, and being that the force arrayed against him is greater, that instinct can only be expressed through flight or escape from the immediate scene, and that is exactly what happened. And having succeeded in fleeing from the immediate scene of the attack, it is reasonable to expect NNAMDI KANU not to flee from the broader scene that comprised of the territory of a Nigeria state that controls the army that invaded his house. The foregoing are but some of the material factual questions that would have been judicially answered in an adversary setting, pursuant to an application, before anyone can come on the legal conclusion that KANU had jumped bail, and such application was made. But guess what? The very court that was supposed to calendar the application to be heard refused to do so, and instead proceeded to decide without taking any evidence that KANU had jumped bail, whereupon it issued the breach warrant that grounded in instant extraordinary rendition. He said application be heard, the court, in place of its ruling that KANU had jumped bail, could have ruled the opposite, and that is it. And that is the Nigeria government and its army that destroyed the ability or duty of KANU to appear at his trial. Therefore, in the same vein, the court would also rule that the Nigerian government was in contempt of court by levying a leather military invasion against a defendant who was free on bail granted by such court. Therefore, it is against the basic canons of equity and fairness to now allow the Nigerian government to profit from its own wrong of causing KANU to flee and then turn around to declare him a fugitive. A fugitive from what? Justice or death. It becomes a double whammy when the same Nigerian government, instead of letting sleeping dogs lie or restoring to the due process of extradition, escalated its sins against KANU by subjecting him to extraordinary rendition. Does two wrongs make a right? Another way of looking at this whole thing is rhetoric, and that is, would any reasonable person have said that KANU jumped bail if his failure to appear at his trial was because he was killed during the invasion? And that is it.